especially for the tag and the launch and what we are discussing with people. We want to focus almost like 70% of our message on the first iteration and say, okay, this is like Moloch DAO plus bonding curve in an iterative token engineering fashion for token engineers by token engineers using token engineering. That being like our...
Yeah, I think
what's that?
I think that makes sense. Again,
yeah.
It's all about the attention funnel. So someone who's only going to give you 10 seconds of attention should hear exactly that. The person who gives you a minute might get a little bit more. And again, my general approach to this is to say 10 seconds, 1 minute, 10 minutes, 1 hour. Like, what would be the things, if someone were to give you that much attention, do you want to say to them? And if you, ideally, by the time you get to someone who listens for an hour, you would have at least been able to give them the high level overview of everything that we're doing, but you certainly wouldn't have done that for someone who's going to have 10 minutes a year.
Yeah, exactly. I've been working on another doc with kind of, actually that's how it should be broken out. This is the 10-second blurb, this is the 2-minute blurb, this is the 20-minute blurb, points to discuss, and you just kind of add those most important next points as the attention span grows. But that's another thing that we identified, is we really want to start on the why. And have this, capture the attention of people before we get into the how. I think that's kind of what has held us back up till now, is thinking back to like the Odyssey. We were talking about the presentations of all of our components and how we were so excited about how they worked, but no one who was watching, the judges and so on, understood why. So they weren't excited about it. They got confused and they walked away to someone else who could explain the why better, even though it was a far inferior product.
No idea how to actually do it. Yeah, no, I understand. But I think that this is the real challenge of the commons, is that you actually have to iterate to get to that point. So the simple explanation of a complex thing is the byproduct of a lot of work. And so we're at the stage now where we are maturing our understanding into a appropriate simplified explanation. But even part of our narrative is going to be, ideally, we have been working on this for a very long time, as Chris had said. And the salient point here is that it's complicated. Making it simple was a lot of work. Here's the simple explanation.
Yeah, exactly. This is a problem it'll solve. This is how it will help you. And you want to go deeper. This is how we're going to implement it. And you want to go deeper than that. Here's the foundational research that goes into all of that. So we're kind of building that funnel of attention, and we're starting to build those links. And I mean, I know you send me so much content and I have it all stored, but we really need to start making that available as well through all this type of content. So I'm excited to start rolling that out through an official comm strategy.
I know that I'm sending you bottom level, and that I'm essentially trusting your skills as a curator to build an attention funnel where, like, I'm at the bottom of the funnel.
Yeah.
And that's totally fine with me. And I'm going to continue to sort of, as long as we're sort of agreeing on the sort of idea that this is an attention funnel, then we can just have conversations at an attention appropriate level. So when we talk about 10 seconds, then what you said at the beginning, I love it. Obviously, like, it's far from complete, but it's right for 10 seconds.
Yeah, and I think those, I'll be building these. We're gonna, one of the things I want to bring in these guys in is that blurb document that I've been working on, because I've been trying to identify, and I mean, that 10-second blurb might change slightly depending on the audience that's being spoken to as well. So, if we're speaking to a commons oriented audience, that is probably a very different 10-second pitch than if we're speaking to the token engineering audience. So yeah, we'll work on a few iterations of each of those.
Well, so I mean, again, I'm very prone to systematize things. I mean, what I'm hearing is that we might actually have a grid, which is attention span and domain. And so a token engineer 10 seconds is different from a DGov person for 10 seconds, but actually that lets us sort of make concrete deliverables and design a set of documents that will maximize the value to as many people without making an infinity of documents.
Yeah.
And also to try and have these presentations be nested as much as possible. So rather than them being distinct, you can either cut it off at 10 seconds or keep going. The first 10 seconds is going to be the same either way, as much as possible.
The grid is actually a graph where every one of the nodes in the graph is a point in the grid. And then you can think of any point in the grid as having a relation depending on, like, something else, and like you can like walk the graph in a sense, which I know I'm the worst.
I love your brain. I love your brain.
Yeah, but indeed it makes sense. But like with the time that we have also to get ready for Berlin, I would like propose indeed let's think grid wise and so on. But like if we have that one blurb document and like indeed it starts with the why for possibly two audiences.
Process.
Yeah.
Gotta remember that when I describe this thing this way, I'm not saying that we should like build everything. I'm saying like here's a paradigm for thinking about what we're trying to accomplish. So like if you have things on the grid that you don't think that you're going to need, there can be missing slots. You can be like, well, I actually don't expect to need to go DGov deepest level because we don't really have that audience yet. And so like
indeed. I think, and it's like, I also just wanted to say, like, for Berlin, token engineering, the token engineers is the priority in any case, like, have that.
That's
like
what we're doing right now.
Yeah, and like the how do you say, like, the different layers, the top can be the same, and then you say, like, I continue, but it's like one simple document that we can start from.
I can stop here.
Not every cell is. In this case, I would argue that not only is it token engineering, but it's also the sort of high to mid level. It's the 10 seconds and the 2 minutes on the token engineering side. You could literally, once you have that grid, you can essentially stack rank the boxes. You could say like, again, I know I'm stupid and I love to systematize, but I'm literally saying like, you have all the framework you need. You know that it's attention depth. You know that it's domain. You have a sense of what's most important once you have that. And you have a sense of what pathways people might follow. So you can essentially take the grid and prioritize it. And if you only generate 5 documents, you can generate the 5 on that grid that you believe will be the ones you hit the most often.
Sorry, 1 second, Z. Yeah.
Little technical interruption. I'm gonna go get Chinese food and bring it back for lunch. I probably will only get one meat dish. What's your guys' favorite or what's your favorite protein? You guys like tofu better than that?
Yeah, I like everything. Tofu's good.
We're good with any Chinese food. You know, for you.
Well, I give it's noodles. Like try to find like rice noodles if they have that. For the rest, I'm fine.
And then veggie dishes.
All veggies.
All veggies.
Oh, broccoli is but
Some kind of sauce.
if you have one without.
What you want?
Thank you so much. Okay, sorry, lunch plans. No, yeah, so what you were saying, it makes total sense. Of course, it's like me coming from a comms perspective, it's the same thing. It's just like you have the grid of your audience and your targeted short messages and longer, it's the same. But yeah, you need that.
Awesome. So that's something we can work on. Yeah. There's one other thing I wanted to discuss with you, Z, and this is mostly narrative. I mean, we've been talking a lot about 6 iterations, them being like component 1, 2, 3, 4, mobile first, easy to deploy. We were thinking from a narrative perspective, especially once we realized we're going to spend 70% of our time speaking about the like iteration 1, and then maybe the other components briefly. We were thinking it would be easier to just say we've got 5 iterations. We've got component 1, component 2, component 3, component 4, field tests, and then 5 is the synthesis plus all this other cool stuff. Mobile first, easy to deploy. I mean, by the time we get to year 2 of this project, we're probably going to be advising this roadmap anyway. So speaking with such detail about later iterations, this came from our conversation with Jordy, where he was kind of like, okay, now you're talking with a lot of detail about something that's probably going to change. So
it's the same reason why I've been playing with the campaigns, because what I was doing with Bernd was basically saying, we know we're going to want to be able to revise things, and we've been playing around with it like 1, 2, 3 are actually much more concrete, and we're organizing even the financial planning and the commitments in a way that gives us maximum flexibility outside of certain time ranges, because frankly, we really don't want to set ourselves up to fail. We need diminishing levels of certainty and commitments in time. So we high degrees of certainty and high degrees of commitment in the sort of short term with, you know, a clear trade-off in terms of money and commitments, et cetera, the further out we get.
yeah,
Totally. And I think especially for this tag thing, since it is a 20-minute or a 30-minute something.
tech presentation.
Right.
Yeah, 20 or so.
So because it needs to be very streamlined, like you said, like zoom in on iteration 1, and then iterations 2 through 6, we want to do this, and like 0
2 through 5.
2 through 5, sorry, 0 differentiation between.
That's what I try to do with the minutes and the as a framework.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah, where you can introduce the different, like exactly what Chris did, where it's like it's broken down on the overall thing that's going to get delivered, but not like
not deep dive
how it's
in.
going to get iterated to greater degrees.
Yeah. Because that's just not working.
It's not interesting. I mean, it's interesting to us. It's not interesting to people who have never heard of this shit before.
It's the how, and it's not the why.
It doesn't help people understand. So,
Z, if you are, I think that's pretty good for high level overview. I guess on that same topic. So this is how I kind of came at it from my presentation, was identifying the issues.
You have to look here a bit, or I have a really bad microphone. I'll try to.
Okay. So this is, kind of talking about our iteration 1. We are, Moloch DAO plus augmented bonding curve. Well, what are the problems that Moloch DAO is facing right now? Well, it's unsustainable funding. We solve that with the bonding curve. There's a lack of accountability. We solve that with the Giveth DApp. They have on-chain voting issues. Well, we solve that with the conviction voting. Not now. This is an iterative design process, but we are looking to produce what they're doing, but upgrading it component by component and making and solving these problems that are plaguing these kinds of groups right now. So that'll be, it'll be, I think, identifying the problems, how they're resolved by these components that we're launching is that 10-second why. And we can easily say, okay, here's this puzzle we're building and we have more ideas. And, this is the iterative component-based design that we are looking to propagate.
And I also just want to point out, throw in my 2 cents that this is a great framing, but let's make really, be very careful that we don't state it in terms of like, here's all the shit that Moloch got wrong, because I don't think we want to get into that kind of thing.
I think we want
the existing.
We don't want to make anyone mess up. We want to frame it like the whole problem is much bigger than just essentially. I mean, they just have literally orchestration. Their contracts are just like a very base level, like coordination at the level of people still are just doing stuff. So,
Right. I would say this is a very simple tool that was built in order to be a very simple tool, and it was successful in that way, and it's useful for what it is. And of course, eventually we're going to want more complex tools. So what do we want as we're adding complexity?
This is UX as opposed to technology-centric adaptation. So you look at Metacartel, Moloch, and Trojan Down, whatever, and what you're saying is, hey, these guys built tech. We're actually taking that technology basis and we're saying, like, we're actually doing engineering work to address the user experience at the community level. This is community level UX, not even individual level UX, because we're not saying that their individual level UX is necessarily bad. We're saying that they were designed from a technological up perspective, and we're taking advantage of their great work, and we're working the direction from a community UX down. And then the only other thing I wanted to say is, because you guys are trying to focus on augmented bonding curve in iteration 1, I think it does make sense for us to spend a little extra energy on the unsustainability of funding, because it's non-obvious that the bonding curve is going to help with that, because unless you actually get into the discussion of circular economy and the sort of inbound flows, outbound flows concepts, and again, this is not a 10-second one. This is probably need a 2-minute version that handles why augmented bonding curves are more sustainable, because technically they still technically still depend on outside donations. So the immediate criticism is going to be, it's not more sustainable. You still need people to give you money. It's the multi-level feedback where Jeff tells the story where, like, Chris is the last person to get to make decisions. There's a back pressure against emptying it. The sustainability doesn't remove the role of outside fundraisers. It creates an interplay between decision-making authority and funds. And we need.
I think it is. I know Chris didn't go into that in his presentation, but I have a few slides on that about the biomimetic nature of these systems we're building and the fact that we are premising our token engineering on token physics. I think this is an important mathematical foundation of our system.
So Jeff,
Sorry?
I'm trying to key off of your topics about why. You're back to describing what we're doing. What I'm saying is that when we drill down once to 2 minutes on token on the first deliverable, when we say that it's sustainable, there's an immediate criticism that is like not actually sustainable. You still need donations. So there's a very much a why is this sustainable, which comes to this biomimetic design stuff, but it needs to be deeper than that. It needs to be something that people will resonate with, where there's this, again, think of it like a causal loop diagram where there's a back pressure to counteract the effect. And that thing is something that the comms team needs to figure out how to convey simply in 2 minutes, because otherwise it's going to be our single weakest link for the story you're building now. Because if we can't get people to believe that this is more sustainable funding, then everything else is they're just going to be like, whatever.
You're right. I started with the how instead of the why on this one. So the first thing we need to say, I already have the slide for it right here. I have the token engineering, the augmented bounding curve flowchart. Actually, I might even cut out most of it, or at least gray it out or something like that, and just get people to focus on this feedback of the friction and saying, look, when we're designing economic worlds, we get to define their physics, and we can basically normal losses in the physical world, like friction, we can feed back as an input in the system to increase the efficiency of this circular economy, requiring less capital input to keep this engine going. That's what we need to say. And then people say, well, how do you do that? Okay, well, we are defining token physics of our system. That's the 5 minute. That's not the 2 minute.
Right.
But the why, the friction feedback and the back pressure and so on, we're building in mechanisms to make this basically like as close as we can to a perpetual motion machine.
But so that's, I would be really careful about the term perpetual motion machine, because by definition, we're saying that's not possible. So energy still has to come from somewhere. So here, let me share my screen.
But this is like we're increasing the efficiency towards, like, say we're pushing it to 98%. It can't get to 100% or 101. That's fine, but we're pushing it closer and closer to that. So we require a little capital input to keep this engine primed and going on its own.
That's much better to make sure that we're saying that these systems are conserving. But this is the chart, although I wouldn't necessarily use it. That is not the whole. Yeah. We have this, which we're not going to be able to use on short things. But this idea that the regenerative value creation is the engine is the output of real value to the world, which is yellow. And what we've done is we've separated the concepts of funding from decision making so that we can have this double loop process. And so I would advocate that you guys take some time with this, or we can talk about it some more, because I think this is your key for the concepts embedded here. So this is obviously still too complicated for 2 minutes, but this is the concept that people should hopefully connect with, that will allow them to believe that we're actually making something sustainable, even though we actually require outside funding. Yeah,
cool. So we want this to be as close to perpetual. So that was really good. Circular economies, I was missing that. Now we can build that into our presentations as well.
We need a 2 minute on that.
And I have talked about it. If you want, we can take a minute. Chris or Adam has any questions? Like, when we talk, what we mean when we talk about the sustainability here, it comes in a very real way from understanding that in our overall system design, that this value production, this material output, the delivery of work is still the engine, and there still has to be money that comes from the outside world in exchange for that value production. Otherwise, you have, again, something that is, whether you want to call it Ponzi or perpetual motion, like there has to be a flow out of this organization, this community that is valuable, whether it's the maintenance of a park or whether it's building open source software. The point is that this whole engine that this system produces something, and that thing is materially useful, valuable in a way that the outside world says, yes, I want that to keep happening, even though maybe I'm not paying for it directly. And that is the funding that has to be balanced with the decision making And of course, our sustainable design principle shows that by separating these two, we can create this corrective loop where as funding diminishes, maybe like the system can collapse and fall away. But as long as the decision makers are turning funds into value, you'll get future funding. And as long as there's funding, you'll get people who want to participate in decision making.
Exactly.
And so they counterbalance. One can decline, but it'll cause the other one to potentially grow. And so the sustainability comes from this systemic effects, not from the individual mechanisms.
Exactly.
Yeah, so the only thing that I'm thinking then, just the feedback when I hear this is indeed the good introduction of the circular economy and explaining here at the beginning of why we're doing this. But then if we take about 2 minutes for this in the presentation.
I don't think we should go into this.
Yeah, I'm not advocating presentation. I'm making
specifically, but I think it's important to say some things, all of which you just said, but I would organize it sort of in this order. Start by giving the overview, which is, we've created a soft boundary around this economy so there can be activity that circulates within there, but value also can pass through that boundary and does in both directions, in and out, right, to the external world. And then you can explain that once that's established and people understand the framework we're talking about, you can give a very, very quick rundown about, the different elements that create and value in this economy and cause it to circulate internally as quickly as we possibly can, quick and dirty. I think this diagram is awesome, but way more than
whatever. I also mean just like not the concept in 2 minutes. I don't care if you visualize.
I'm not asking you guys to use this diagram. I'm trying to make sure that you guys are equipped to handle questions about sustainability, because I view it as a point of what I'll call naive contention, meaning someone who doesn't know concepts will immediately contend that it's not sustainable. And so if you can't, you need the base level understanding so that you are equipped to answer those questions well.
For sure. Yeah, and I'm not saying it's not part of our narrative. I'm curious if it will fit into this attention span. That is a very important discussion point for the comment stack overall. But if we were focusing 70% of our narrative on Moloch plus ABC plus token engineering, I think it's
so maybe 70% is
biomimetic. We talk about economies as organisms like cells with this permeable membrane of the augmented body curve. There's all sorts of those topics. The question is, where is the attention span?
Yeah, that's a great way to talk about the circular economy in terms of biomimesis. You can kill two birds with one stone.
Yeah, it's the same feeling that when Zargam is explaining this, I'm like, yes, this is the first thing to introduce, even if it's very briefly, but it's indeed like making clear to the people what we're building is a sustainable system, and mention it in whatever way that you feel comfortable with. But then and talking by biomimetics, and then I would say if you take 1 or 2 minutes to make the introduction about the whole bigger system, then take at least 2 minutes as well to also go in the augmented bonding curve specifically, because that is the funding. So that's the thing that we need to talk most about when it is about the components.
All right.
No, that's the goal. So I keep playing with my own presentation because I know Jeff is working on his own version, but at some point the two might merge and or might get into sync, which would be a cool thing. So I added a screenshot just as a reminder for the flow of what you said, Zargam, because it does make sense for me to start about the whole that they get, because
Do you have Do you have access to the notebook?
I don't know, but Jeff has it, I guess, right?
I do, but I don't think I can give it access.
The general expectation that you guys can play with, pull, edit those diagrams. I had shared them with Jeff. They're in my Lucidchart, my paid Lucidchart account, so they should be, as long as you have the links, I think you're able to to play with them.
Oh, cool. My vision for diagrams like this, I'm still looking at your yellow, green, and blue value creation and so on. I can't think of a clearer way to like turn it into a flow chart, but I think this is the kind of content that I have a talk with JP on Friday. And I want to like enlist the help of one of his visual people. So like we can sit down and talk through this and he can just draw it in whatever way that comes clear.
Darren in particular is really, really good with this stuff.
Because it's going to make it more human.
Yeah, because people read this. I mean, if you can parse it, it is such a huge idea. It is so important, but it just looks confusing. People are like, oh, what am I missing? Like, what are these squares? What are these circles? Like, it would just be so much better with a picture of a whale with a Docker container on its back.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
Like, oh, sweet.
I'm choosing between this and Jeff,
I don't speak that language, so I speak this language.
It's just like that picture you sent, the integration between GitHub and Docker and Jupyter Hub. I was like, oh shit, now I get it. Like I see how these things work together. Cool, the whale, nice. So it's just so like I think that kind of visual is exactly, and I'm excited to see what we can put together with Native 2.0.
Yeah,
if that needs to be built into our budget. I think it is so valuable because that explains document of text in a photo.
But the thing is, indeed, that guy just does it like while he will be listening to you, he will be drawing it. You saw how quickly he draws, so that would be a cool thing. Yeah.
Close to the point too where because we focused on why, and you guys have been doing such a good job capturing these higher level narratives that you need to be prepared to essentially try to recruit JP marshal his forces, because JP very much believes in the same stuff. He and I have been talking for now like a year and change, and like he knows that this is the right method, but he's very much in the why. And so as we get the why, he's a powerful ally. It's just that he's not ready to engage with the what. And so your success here can be leveraged into more collaboration, both because they're awesome at the very human, very motivational stuff, but you kind of you have to bring it all the way to that level before they can really get into it with us. But once we get it to that why level, they can magnify that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I've been seeing more and more of these groups that are working strongly in the why, the Inspirals, the DGov groups, we're starting the P2P foundations, a lot of their content is explaining this high level narrative very well and very thoroughly. We don't have to reinvent that wheel. We can say, hey, here's the content.
Plug into it.
Our job is actually to empower them to execute on those whys, but we also have to bridge language. We can't just say, hey, we're empowering you. We have to meet them at the why, but our job isn't to own the why. Our job is to meet them at the why and empower them to succeed.
Yeah,
indeed. And so we're probably, that's the thing that we're going to do probably in the coming 2 years, is that language is going to evolve, and we're going to meet in the, find a common ground with all of these organizations, so that the moment that the how and the implementation is some sort of ready, that they're immediately convinced by the why. Yeah. But we're not there yet.
Cool. Well, that was awesome. I think we got some really good things out of this meeting.
When do you have a call with those guys? Because I want to hear you explain it.
Which guys?
Nature 2.0.
Friday, we don't have a time yet, but I can include you.
I would love to just listen.
Cool, yeah. Sounds good. All right, sorry we didn't get you any more time to prep here, Z. We did take the full hour, but I think that was really, really powerful, and we got a lot of things to move forward on.
It was worth it. And I mean, I just want, I appreciate what you guys are doing so much, because as you might have noted, I just literally don't speak that language. It's so hard. I know that it's important.
They're your ideas. I'm just explaining them to people who don't understand your language.
How Abby does the thing with the little alien whenever she references me, is pretty much just I speak this weird mathy structural semi-formal language, and outside of it, I feel the importance of those other forms. I just can't quite get there.
But you
need to stay there. You need to stay there. We just need more people at the explainer level. That's cool. We'll find them.
You need to focus on the complex level, because that takes all of your brain in itself, of course. So indeed, stay there. And it's with what Jeff has been explaining to me in the past months. It's now when I'm listening to you, I understand you. Because now,
I get it.
In the beginning, I was like, "Oh no, my brain is already overwhelmed today," and now I'm meeting Z. This is too much information. But now I'm getting your actual words. So
I looked through your old content and old presentations, and I'm like, "Holy crap! He's been saying this the whole time. He's been saying this for years. How come nobody gets this?"
it's just a lot of information, but yeah.
Well, you guys are very much doing an awesome job making it so that more people can understand it, and I understand the difference. So I just wanted to say thank you. I'll let you guys get back to stuff, and I'll see you this afternoon.
Okay. And thank you too.
Peace.
Bye. You also have to stop yours, because then the stream stops automatically. Otherwise, it keeps on going.